Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leader Series. We have Labeeb Ismail, who is the founder and CEO of Kavia AI. Kavia AI focuses on using AI to change the way that product development is done within organizations. This conversation really goes into depth about the problems of developing in those organizations in different types of cultures at different stages of the process, and how Labib has been a very successful leader within that, but also how, as being a successful leader, he's had a lot of ideas of how tools can be used, AI tools, in order to improve that. And that's what he's doing now with Cavia. So you're going to learn a lot during this interview, and I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you very much. So, Labib, without further ado, it'd be great to understand a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, a little bit about your kind of journey as a leader, and how you get to be here, which is the founder of a new AI business, which is Kavia AI, which is really looking to redefine, product development primarily for large organizations. You come from a background in product development in large organizations. So, yeah, tell us a bit about yourself, Labib, and how you got to be here.
Well, it was kind of interesting when you were asking earlier, like how many years. I was kind of counting how many years of experience I have. So I guess I'm really deserving my gray hair because I've been in this industry for 32 years. I came out of college, called now REC. Now it's called NITC, National Institute of Technology, for in India. And coming out of college, I actually got into engineering, and I worked for some Indian companies, like TVS Electronics, and then at Wipro. And then worked for a consulting company, where we actually kind of created a company, so that which was my first experience as a co-founder, building a product which is akin to TiVo and Replay. Like
Okay. Yeah.
we got investment from Canal Plus, Thomson Multimedia, Seagate. So we had like a lot of investors in that space who were very interested in. And that also was my first experience in AI, because one of the things that we try to do is trying to kind of understand what kind of programs people like, and also like trying
Yeah.
to kind of understand more about like how to target ads to people based on what are their past preferences. Which is like, this is in the 90s, right? So this is like really,
Wow.
really early,
Yeah.
trying to do this. And then I have
Sure.
been at Comcast for like 20 years. When I decided to leave Comcast and start Kavia, we'll get to that a little later. But I think to answer your question, in Comcast is kind of like where where the bulk of my career is where I kind of learned about like how to work in large organizations, like what would lead to success, what are the things which are frustrating, and all of that. Like, so that is like that 20 years kind of like is where I kind of learned like in Comcast, where I started like in a more technology strategy kind of role, and then eventually kind of start working on this new project called X1 at that time. It wasn't called X1 at those days, it was called Excalibur, which was the team which built X1. So
Yeah.
that whole journey has been like very interesting within Comcast.
Fantastic. And I think, what's really interesting, GCS work really heavily within, as you know, the broadcast area, and have done for many years. And it's so interesting, like you said, like your progression through the different technologies and improving the services, improving the devices is something, one, we've helped with in terms of supplying people into these projects. But secondly, it's just amazing to see how much it's progressed, from you saying like, adverts and trying to work out how you could take something and promote it to a certain person and not to another person, to now when you look at some of the devices, from Netflix and the streamers all the way through to the media companies, there's so much more personalization, so much more intelligence, isn't there? And the product is so much easier to use. And I know that's happened a lot within technology, but I do feel that, the broadcast industry is so customer focused. It has to be. I always think it's a bit of it's an arms race, isn't it, right? Because customers change quick. You have to have the best type of product. You have to be pretty on it, otherwise people will leave you, don't they?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I think the industry has changed, especially very drastically in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
When X1 came out, it was a giant step forward in the interactive user experience for these
Mm,
devices, right? Since then, this has kind of become the norm, and now everyone is trying to figure out like how else do you kind of make a case for customers to
mm,
stay, like what are the other seamlessness that we can provide, like how do you integrate your experience with other services that you get from them, how do we connect with all different apps, and like how do we let the navigation to be like ultra super smooth.
mm.
That industry has drastically changed from where it was like even just 10 years ago.
And I think, one of the things I'm quite interested in, we always talk about like challenges as a leader, but you've obviously been very successful as a leader within a large organization. And for those who don't know, Comcast is obviously a huge multinational conglomerate that owns things from NBC to Sky to Universal Studios, and has gone through a lot of changes itself during that 20-year period from when you've worked there. I'm always quite interested to speak to someone like yourself who's obviously survived well. What are the sort of challenges you get in this constantly changing, constantly growing, different companies coming in? Like what, for someone that's sitting here thinking that's similar to the sort of organization I work in, what's your best advice to exist and thrive as a leader when there's so much change?
Yeah. So, so the path that I took may not be the same for everyone else, right? Like
Mm,
I kind of see myself as a technology first person, like essentially, like, and
right.
I am like a very conscious and very focused on people as well. But at the same time, I know that there are like leaders who are like heavily like who gets people very well, like they are like extremely strong at people management and
Mm,
understanding their aspirations and kind of really helping them, and then rely heavily on people for all the ideas and how things move
mm,
forward. To me, it's been a mix. Like I do that a lot. I have had like some great people in my team, and they come up with a lot of great ideas. But also, I kind of feel like I also need to understand the technology, how the nuts and bolts work to the lowest level, so that I can also kind of understand what problems are hard problems, what problems
mm,
are solvable problems, like what problems are things that we can implement and roll out faster, what all are the big bottlenecks. So I like to understand the nuts and bolts of the technology, and then kind of work with the team. I remember like many cases where we are like struggling with certain problems. My approach is not like, hey, go figure it out. Like, I'm like, hey, let's just talk a little bit about the problem, and then kind of see if we can come up with a better way to solve it. And in some cases, in many cases, my team would come up with a better way than
mm.
I if I would have come up with initially,
But
or
you've started the conversation yourself and you're leading people to it. I guess that as a leader, that real depth of the technology knowledge, that really sets you apart. It gives you a value, doesn't it? Not everyone, lots of people could be people management, but not everyone could have the people management plus the real deep technical skill sets, right?
Yeah, I think I can provide some value add in providing the initial like ideas and steps to the people. But a lot of times I do it because that's what I love to do. And that's kind of
Yeah, yeah.
my passion of trying to understand how it works. I'm always like curious to kind of figure out like, okay,
Mm,
why is this way? Essentially, and this is like kind of like it is. I'm like pretty excited about like learning about things like that, and then trying to
Mm.
kind of look at those problems and like kind of more or any problems kind of excites me to for me to kind of look at it. So that is the one way which I look at it. So yeah, as a part of it, yes, that I think I add value. As a part of it, I think teams in some cases like engaging with me, and in some
Mm.
cases they are like a little intimidated, I would say. And I'm very aware of it, and I try to kind of really like kind of hold back
You,
sometimes, sometimes,
You
but
strike me as quite a humble person. I quite like. Obviously, I've done a lot of these leader series, and not to be nasty about any of the leaders I've spoken to because they're all fantastic. But you don't always get someone that identifies what they're good at and maybe what they're not so good at. Generally, people just focus on I'm really great at this and I did all these great things. Are you someone like that? You kind of can have a look at yourself from externally and objectively look at what you can improve, or in some ways you don't need to improve it because you're good at this.
No, no, it's I am like I am always a critic of
Mm,
myself. I'm aware of the things which I recognize, because of course there are like for every one thing that I recognize, there are probably 100 things that I miss. Of the
mm,
things that I recognize that I did something wrong, right? And then sometimes it's immediately apparent. Sometimes I kind of realize that like few weeks or months into it, or sometimes like they actually point that out, like, hey, you didn't do this right thing here, like you reacted this way, or you said this, you sent us
yeah.
this, and but I'm like really glad when people say that, because
Mm.
then I feel like that is my success, that the people that I then that they can come and talk to me about like what I did wrong, essentially, right? And that to me, I kind of call that as a success.
I've always found for myself that, again, talking about changing environments and different people and working with different projects and teams, that I've always prided myself as a whenever I meet someone new, I try to get the knowledge from them, like learn from their experience, learn from things they know. And I think that helps to integrate things, but also just helps to build up my knowledge. And it sounds like that's something that you've done over the years.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think people always amaze me. But like I interact with them, and some ideas that come from people that from an unexpected person, like and that I was like, wow, that is amazing. I didn't think that they were thinking about that particular level of detail, essentially, right?
Mm,
And then I also. Really love the experiences that they bring in from their culture, their background, and their struggles in many cases. So
mm,
there are people who have like unique perspective because of their background. And
mm,
I really love that. I think one good thing of working for a company like Comcast is the amazing group of people with so much diversity that I was able to
mm.
interact with, and to learn from like their unique way of thinking, because also from their background.
Yeah, yeah. So you can, yeah, you're learning together, aren't you? I think that's very important. And the other thing I wanted to kind of understand just in your journey is obviously you started your career in India and became a kind of leader there, and then came to the US and you've worked in that company culture. And one of the things I'm always quite interested in, because obviously these are the two tech powerhouses of the world, right? India and the US. But myself as a recruiter, when I deal with a US business versus an Indian business, there's a lot of change. And just to give you my external point of view of how that might work, to me, sometimes the Indian companies are very successful. They don't always seem to be quite so kind of organized in a kind of an external way, whereas the American companies seem to be very successful, but seem to be kind of like over organized. And I don't know if that's something you found yourself, but what's your experience of that kind of two different working cultures? Because they're definitely very different the way they run their businesses, I've seen, as a supplier.
So one thing what I have to say is even though I have worked with a lot of companies who
Mm,
are based in India,
yeah.
there most of my interaction with companies in India has been kind of in they were like vendors to Comcast, like they were like
Yeah.
partners to Comcast, building stuff.
Mm.
So they are like mostly what in India they call a service based company, service provider
Right.
company.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
provide services to other company. So the
Mm.
culture in that company might be slightly different than companies who are looking to build their own products in India. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
something that I am finding out now,
Mm.
because as part of Kavia, I'm interacting with several small companies who build their own product. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and I'm kind of using some of their help in building stuff. And the culture there and the depth there is different than what I've seen in traditional service provider company. Like again, like the
Mm.
companies, I don't want to call out the name, but most of the companies that I've worked out, they have like great depth. Like they have like people with a lot of like knowledge and
Mm.
a lot of passion, drive, and all of that. But they are used to working in like pretty large projects. So
Yeah.
what that means is they have a very good depth in a particular area. Like they are not as much generalist, even though I would say like they move from one project to the other, but at the same time they kind of stay in their area of depth. So I kind of
Mm.
find a lot of people with a lot of depth versus like when I interact with small companies, they kind of like have people who grew up in a slightly different culture, right? Now they have to figure out how to solve whatever problem that they have to do to get their product out, right? And which to me seems a little bit more like the current like American startup scene. Like if you look
Yeah.
at San Francisco now with the AI boom, you would see like a lot of like real smart startups, startup founders or startup like team members, work like co-founders, the part of the founding team or the part of the initial like
Mm.
100 people. They many of them didn't grow up here because San Francisco has been like attracting people from elsewhere because of the
Yeah.
AI boom. So one thing what you see is these kind of like generalist approach, like they understand AI, but they also understand like several other technologies needed to
Sure.
get something out fast, essentially, like, which is actually interestingly, I'm also seeing that kind of similar thing in some of these smaller companies that I'm interacting with in India.
Yeah. And I guess that links into like a main station because we mentioned about product development in large organizations. And you mentioned a little bit there the types of people that work in large organizations versus the types of people who work in shorter, smaller organizations. And obviously that's something that Cavia themselves are really looking at, you know. So before we kind of go into what Cavia does and what this particular technology can do, what do you think are the key issues around product development in large organizations and the things that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah. So my team as well, but I don't know if I mentioned, I think my team when I left my position was as big as like over 2,000 people, like
Yeah.
employees and contractors
And
spread
did you
across.
know them all by name, Labeeb? Did you know them all by name? Is that how big does a team have to be before you stop knowing everyone by name, do you think?
Yeah, I think probably around like 50.
50, all right, yeah.
So that is all my capacity. That's all my
So,
what I can hold,
I
you know.
reckon I could do 150. Yeah, carry on. Okay, so you've got
Uh,
2,000 people that you need to push in the right directions. What are the problems that come with that?
So I'll kind of give you a test case, and
Mm,
again, like not specific to Comcast. This is
mm,
something what I've seen across the board. So let's say like you have an application,
yeah,
and you want to build a key, and this is like an application which is used by millions of people. This is not like a startup kind of thing. Like millions of
yeah,
people, it connects to a lot of your services, and that is how people customers are accessing that service. And now
yeah,
let's say like you want to build a new feature like a multi-user support. So currently, let's say
yeah,
like each account you have one user that you can sign in for the account, but now let's say the product come in and say like our competition have multi-user support, like so multiple people in the household can have their own individual account, and then
yeah.
you have super
Okay.
user. Something like that. Like so now, if a feature like this would come in the pipeline because the product or the business said like, hey, this is a key feature that we need to do, And
Sure.
now that would, and there are like several other features like that in the pipeline, like
Mm.
which is of interest. Now, someone has to go in and define what does that mean. So
Yeah.
the business team said like, hey, we need multi-user support. So you need to now you spend like weeks and weeks, sometimes months, trying to define what does that mean. What now you need multiple users. So now you need a super user. How do you
Mm.
onboard these different users? Like what permissions and what services are controlled by this? So there is a lot of definition portion of it. So you need, even though you have product managers who knows their product and all the features of it, like, but now this touches upon several features of the product, because you need to really see like what features should be under access control, and how do we should have like which features should have write control, write permission versus read permission. So there's a lot of things which has to be figured out. So product managers now have to coordinate with other product managers to kind of say that what it is. So it'll take like weeks or months in defining that. But then once you have defined it, you now need to go and assess it. Right. So now you need to find out like architects who would go and look at it. Like you need to find like some bunch of technical leaders, and they have to look at like a lot of product documentation, technical documentation, API documentation, how the features, how the code is structured, how what all components would be impacted with it. And so that is going to take a while.
Mm.
Like and typically in large organization, this is done in like quarterly cadence. Like
Right.
so in the next quarter, someone would come in and kind of say that, hey, this is the work for this is this much of work, and this is how you go about which these are the system which would be impacted. This would be other part of the. This is how other systems could be impacted by if you make this change. So
Mm.
all of that, like, and then you go into the development team, right? So then go into the next quarter. So you are broken down into like a 15 development team which might be impacted, or 5 development team which was impacted, and then there is some definition of this is what you're
And
going to do.
this is where like lay people might know, but this is where you might break it down to kind of an agile environment. You know,
Yeah.
agile is obviously some ways that they've trying to move towards
Yeah.
making it faster and more efficient, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Mm.
so agile comes in once you go into the agile team. Like so,
Yeah.
in many of the organizations, they operate in squad, like probably like 8 to 9 people squad, which takes on work. But before
Mm.
things go into squad, you need to still break things down in
Yes.
multiple before
Yeah.
it can go into their pipeline of how it is done, essentially.
Yeah.
Uh, and then so then it goes, once it goes into the squad, they kind of they use all the work done, and then come up with their own assessment of like, okay, how long is going to take, like is it like 1 sprint, 2 sprint, 3 sprint, whichever it is, like and they would come back with their initial estimate, and this is how they're going to test it, like all of that, right? And then they go ahead and build test cases, build it,
Mm.
their portion of it. And then you need to kind of like figure out how to independently test your portion, like, and make sure there are no regression with all the other features that you have, right? And then you go into the kind of now assembling it back up. Like, so initially you kind of deconstructed the problem into all of this, which went into different squads, and now you have to assemble it back up and merge to the next level, test it, and then each level in your testing, there is a lot of other features which is coming in, right? So
Mm.
so you have to kind of now, when you have issues, you need to figure out like if the issue happened because of this change which came in, or some other change which came in, right? Or is
Mm.
it because now the component that you're interacting with is not behaving correctly, all of that, like, so
Mm.
where the issue is, and like so this whole process now of constructing back, and then you at some point all the tests across various teams have passed, like and then we go into like the trial phase, like sometimes there is like a more system test, and then the trial phase, and then you start rolling out, and then you have like teams looking at issues happening as we are rolling this out, and is it because of the component A or component B, or
Mm.
like component like a XY, whichever it is, right? So that is like the whole process. Now, during this process, what you would see is,
But from again, from a layperson's perspective, that sounds like there's about a million fail points in there that could go wrong, and then you have to keep going back and going forward, and
yeah, yeah,
there's
exactly.
yeah.
And a lot of time when the problem is localized. Let's say like
Mm.
when the problem is inside a particular component and inside a particular part of the component, it's much easier to find, right?
Yeah.
Um, when the problem is at the point of integration, and if that problem is not always apparent, like it happens only when a fail case happen, like one of the not
Mm.
not the sunny day scenario, like one of this stormy day
Yeah.
kind of scenario, which doesn't happen all the time, which happens in some scenario. Then some of the interaction points may misfire, right?
Mm.
And then you have these issues which no one knows where the issue is happening. Like you're trying to
Mm.
track down like what exactly is happening is a little tricky because you probably don't have log files or log files or tracing for that particular scenario baked in between interaction between components. So now you're trying to scratch your head to trying to figure out like what is the code path between these two which kind of fail. So a lot of times, like we find issues, it happens in the field like one in a million times, right? Trying to figure that out. Like so, we know that there was something failed at the top level because some of the logs that from the logs that we'll find that something failed. Now you don't really know what is a combination of the state of different components which resulted in that failure, right? So that kind of so overall, then there is a the long tail of issue discovery and solving, which is needed before we finally release this product and stabilize this product. Like so, in this
And
whole
then
process,
probably halfway through, someone said, "Oh, could you also do this?" So let's say you're using the test case multi-users. Someone said, "Oh, and can you make it work for this
yeah,
version of the iPhone or something?"
yeah, yeah,
Then they're
yeah,
like, and you got
yeah.
10 or 20 of these coming down the line.
Yeah, exactly. No, so a lot of times what happens is two things will happen. Like one is because of this long lead time, the product team and architect team, they feel like they need to spend a lot of time in defining the features and
Yeah,
architecture and APIs and all of that because a change is going to take now another 3 months or 6 months. So they are
yeah,
like
yeah.
worried about bringing in new requirement because that is going to
Mm.
slip the whole project like heavily, right? The second part is there are then some changes which would come in, and a lot of times that change, if it is kind of very localized to a single component, that's easy to do. But a lot of times that's not the case. If there's some change which comes in, now you need to change all the 15 components to support it. And a change like that is going to take a long time
It
because
sounds
trying
like
to
it
figure out.
sounds like an absolute nightmare. Like I know
Yeah,
that we're
exactly.
going to get onto this and we're going to say, and there's this fantastic device, but it does sound like a nightmare. So there's a couple of things it sounds to me like, right. So we're talking about large organizations, yeah? So I
Yeah.
guess what a large organization could do, because they're a large organization, is just throw more money at it. Like they could just spend more and more and more money. And I guess you've seen that. Like, I know budget's obviously important, but it's like I would just keep spending and spending and spending. But it's not actually going to sort the problem out because you're just spending more money.
Yeah, I have seen like that happen a lot, like on some
Mm.
projects where like, hey, we really cannot afford to miss this, but we also need these other new things that which you didn't originally plan. So can we give you this much money, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is like in many cases, money cannot solve the problem. Like the
No.
problem was because of this the thing what I
Yeah.
talked about is like you money and more adding more people is really not going to help because
Yeah, because it's hard to
you're
hire the people, right? So you
yeah.
need talented people, you can't find them. And
Yeah,
also, the more people cause more problems. There's even more
yeah,
kind of
exactly. Because
inputs.
the problem is so distributed in the system that you don't know where you're going to add that people. Like, are you going to add in this team or this? Because you going to add like 15% of a person in this team and 20% of the person in that
Yeah.
team, like, or you're going to add like 20 people all together and add like one person at every team, and that one person doesn't know anything about the project, and that person now is going to slow down everyone else because everyone else has to spend time in catching that person up, right?
I'm surprised anyone ever actually releases any software. It's
No, yeah. So no, I
no
know of
wonder
projects.
no wonder you've got grey hair, Labeeb.
I have seen of projects which started as like 9 month project, which kind of easily became like 18 month project, and sometimes even longer, right? So
Mm.
I do have, and when these projects go on much longer, that there is another pain point, which is your sometimes you have done all this code, which is kind of like now your code is pregnant with these new features, right? But you haven't released this feature, so we want to hold this back, and you want because and there's so many other changes happening at the same time, right? So you want
Mm.
to hold this back and not release it, right? But then that is it's on tricky because now you have to constantly rebase your change. You have to constantly merge it back to this and spend a lot of time in maintaining your change in a branch. If it is not, if it is a big change which affects like 15 different components, you have to hold all of those back and spend a lot of time in maintaining that change. So
Yeah.
we have this thing that if a big feature requires a quarter or multiple quarters, especially if there are multiple quarters, that it would require even more quarters, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
of the maintenance cost of it.
I mean, for a recruiter, this sounds fantastic, right? I think this is brilliant. This just seems that you need to hire more and more software engineers. GCS makes more money. Everything's good, but I know it doesn't quite work out like that. So.
So, I have to say, like now, where AI could help, right?
Yeah,
And then also
yeah.
like the area where I'm focusing Kavia on is
Mm.
this. Like I think as a recruiter, maybe you don't want to hear this, but
Well,
but
it is
in reality,
interesting, and we'll kind
yeah,
of
the
come
real
on to more the outcomes of AI because I've seen it for myself, right? But yeah, let's talk now. So basically, you've left Comcast now and you've started a business called Caviar. And obviously, we've gone in quite a lot of detail about what the issues are. And I'm sure you're not going to say, well, I've solved them all because that would be perfect. But how does Caviar help with this? Can it help? And how can maybe people listening to it and not using Caviar take some of the ideas and improve their lot within these organizations?
Yeah, I think prior to before I just getting into this, like I said, even within
Mm.
Comcast, we had put a lot of effort in trying to use technology to improve productivity, right? Because I
Yeah,
personally really hate people having to do the same thing again and again, like test a
yeah,
piece of code like every day, like 15 times, like that's just crazy. It just feel like that is to a certain extent even like an insult of someone's capabilities if they are asking you to if you are asking them to just repeat like
mm,
some simple things like every day, like so we like
yeah,
go and look at the dashboard and see if something is turning red and like do this after that, or when you have to kind of give them a guide and ask them to kind of read through it and do step 3 and then step 5 and step 7, something like that. I just feel like that is the note we should apply people's minds. Like I think I really think that people's mind should be applied in progressive things, which kind of gives them the satisfaction of contributing directly to the success of the team rather than kind of like
sure.
they don't know why they did the
Checking the
same thing
dashboard.
15 times. Like yeah,
Mm.
exactly. So we did a lot of automation in applying technology so that we don't have to do this uber like ultra repetitive stuff, right?
Mm.
But having said that, like one of the things what I realized is I really this is with the first of all like the AI, especially when GPT 3.5 came out, kind of blew
Mm.
my mind on what it could do, like the natural
Mm.
language processing and some amount of reasoning, and then like over the last like 2 years, the improvements that I've seen on AI has been really amazing, especially like the latest version of the O1 preview, which came out of OpenAI.
Mm.
So all of this. So when GPT 3.5, the ChatGPT came out, I immediately tried to see like what all are the things that we could do with it.
Mm.
Like it
Yeah, yeah,
turns out
yeah.
there's a lot of
This goes
interesting.
back to your I want to know how things work and I want to try to help to find the solution. Whereas I guess there would be other leaders, particularly large organizations, that would let someone else do it, right? So you wanted to find out, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So
Mm.
so when I yeah, so I immediately start like personally playing around with it, and then I asked several projects to use GPT 3.5 to do a bunch of stuff. And it turns out it's a hit or miss. Like it
Mm.
was very difficult to do anything production grade on that, like anything which is usable
Yeah.
with those early versions of AI, right? And then
Mm.
second thing is like there is it showed a lot of promise, but at the same time, like, using in real life scenario where it is really helpful. Other than like the coding suggestion is useful, like even though a lot of times you may get the wrong suggestion, but a lot of times you would. So then if it would kind of give someone a jump start, right? So there are
Yeah.
like some particular use cases where it is very interesting, but there were also several other cases where it wasn't quite there, right?
Mm.
So, but one of the things what I realized is like, hey, if we can work with it, we can figure out what are the strengths, what are the things that AI can do, and what are the things that we can still rely on people to do,
Mm.
and if we can figure out like how to kind of build a system where people and AI could work together in
Better.
solving
Yeah.
some of the problems that I mentioned earlier. That would be great. Like so, so I said like, hey, I really need to focus full time on it. So that's why I left Comcast and then I started Kavia. So Kavia is right now we have like around 20 people spread all over the world. I have a bunch of people in India, some people in US, some in like Canada, Denmark,
Mm.
Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So, so it's kind of like a very
You're a busy man,
geographically
Labeeb.
distributed team, and UK
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. 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 Exactly.
Uh,
um.
yeah, so the main thing which I want to look at is the problem that I talked about is like in the reason why everything gets slowed down in this product development cycle that I said is information processing, right? So information processing in the previous, well, like all of IT is about information processing, right? But most of those were, I would say, static processing, right? Where you look at like a particular strings and say, if you see this string, you convert into that string. If you see
Mm.
this, do that. Like so, instead now we can put AI in the middle of it and use AI to have a little bit deeper understanding of what are the information involved, and then trying to do the first level of processing by AI, and then you provide the output to people and see if that solves their problem. If not, they can further engage with AI in continuing to solve the problem, essentially.
So just if we go back to the kind of test cases and the use case you spoke about there, when you were talking about the architects and the product managers spending a lot of time on the analysis to work out all the things that could go wrong with regards to the code and implementing it correctly, can we use the AI to kind of slim down that particular process so it can very quickly work out all the
Yeah.
different reasons why you could should or would do this, and then it will come back to you with
Yeah.
some really good kind of, look, I've done your 3 months work for you in 3 hours, and this is what you should think, and then now you can make a decision type thing.
Well, you have taken the answer right out of my
Yeah,
mouth.
yeah.
It's so that is kind of like how Kavya works, right? So
Mm,
let's say like you want to come back to the same story that I was talking about, like building a multi-user support, right? So
mm,
you got this request from the product team. Now a product manager or even like your group head could kind of go into the system and said like, hey, I want to do this. Like I want to add
mm,
multi-user support. Like multi-user support, what does that mean? You don't have to explain to it. This now it would kind of generate agents which
mm,
would go in and look at all your existing features, and it also
mm,
has enough knowledge about what multi-user should be, and then kind of start like speculating about like a what how would it look like, and then
yeah,
kind of like then it would come up with the first draft of like a your this feature you have to change, your this portion has to change. So it could come up with the first draft of it, and then the product manager could interact with it
yeah.
and say like
So what if I did this, or what if I did
yeah,
this?
and say like, well,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe this feature we don't want this, maybe this. So now you can now what you could probably have like the first version in hours, like first version which would have taken weeks or months earlier. We could have the first version of this, and in Kavya you could now show that work to someone else. Like you can send it to
Yeah.
the architect, you can send that work to your manager, or you can send it to the another product manager, saying that, hey, look, you look at the work that I've done. Like, what do you think about it, right? And then someone would say, like, well, you know what? I'm going to talk to Kavia about this other thing. So I made
Yeah.
these other changes to it, like after talking to it. So now that modification is sent back to this other of the first guy or the first person, right? And say like, okay, these are the additional modification we think we should do, and then at the same time, you want to send it to an architect, you can send now to an architect who would look at it. And now an architect, how architect would engage with this is the same thing. Like it would ask Kavia to say like, hey, in order to implement a feature like that, like how would I go about doing that? This 50, so Kavia would kind of again instantiate agents who would go in and look at it component by component and say like, hey, this component needs this change. In order to implement this feature, this component needs this change, and kind
Yeah.
of come up with the initial draft of what kind of changes are done. Like, and again, in hours or further, like within like a day, now architect is coming back and saying, coming up and with an assessment that like, hey, this is going to impact like 5 systems or 15 systems, and the impact on 3 systems are pretty big, whereas other systems are not that much. You need to do the UI design for it. Like, so now you're kind of getting into the assessment portion of it, like in hours or days, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so and then the process continues. Like then when the architect thinks that this is pretty good enough, then they send it to the whole package into like some various each of the development leads, and they would look at it again in Kavia and then come back and say like, hey, this is great, but you didn't consider these other things in the system. Like and then like, so what I'm saying, like you are like now building this work, and then you're
It's the man
integrating to
machine
the system.
interface within that, isn't
Yeah,
it? So
exactly. So it is using the existing knowledge about the system
mm,
and then you have like these agents who can process through it and then come back with a lot more intelligent answer, and then you can continue interacting with it. Because sometimes it misses stuff, and that is the thing. Like
mm,
with AI, sometimes it misses stuff, and then you actually tell it like to go look at that particular thing, and then the agents
yeah.
would go in and
Yeah.
look at that particular thing and come back and like look at it. Like so that is kind of how a work progresses in this Kavia, and then eventually it goes into a very specific thing where you have to now write code, right? So again,
Mm,
like so let's say like it broke down into the 15. From there it kind of further broke down into like all these things, and saying like a one particular piece of component needs some very specific change, right? So now
mm,
that we need to build the code for it, so now we have the code generation agent invoked. So the code generation really comes in like the last step, not exactly the last step, but like pretty late in the system, because we have done like all of this higher level work
mm.
ahead of it. So and the code generation is invoked for that very particular piece, and by then we also have built the test changes, all the changes in the test that we have to test based on this, and then now those tests are applied against that. So that is kind of, so now this thing which would have taken like 9 months or 12 months in the earlier system, now you could get done in like days or weeks, like maybe
Mm.
months, right? Because there are still cycles which would still go up and down. Like, but now the thing is like the thing of going up and down happens through Kavia in a much faster way. Like it
Mm.
is not happening like over email and Slack messages, and then after that you have like meetings after meetings where like you have 20 people coming into this meeting, but now you can see what different people are seeing in Kavia, and then you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
like interact with it. So that is kind of like to me, and like any of these work packages which is kind of percolating. Like so, there are many of them happening in parallel in the system, right? Each
Yeah.
of
Yeah. And it could probably tell you as well, oh, you've already used this, you've done this in this place, so you could use it here if you know
yeah,
what I mean. It can kind of give you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
advice. I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
you know, we a lot of our we've recently restarted the latest series and we've spoken to quite a lot of people on the AI side. I guess as my last to kind of kind of bring this really interesting conversation to a close, I've got just a couple of things there. We obviously mentioned there with regards to what that means for the talent world, you know. I think you've there mentioned that obviously what this means for quite a lot of people is that they can focus on the parts of the work they enjoy rather than the parts of the work that take time. What do you think it really does mean for the world of technology, in terms of, so there's quite a lot of roles that will change as part of this, and certain types of skills will not be as needed. Do you worry about that, or do you think this is just normal world and this is how things move forward?
I worry about it, or I think about it all the time. Like I think
Mm,
um, I have one of my cousins in India who is reached out to me, and his job through which he is supporting his family was
mm,
as a transcriber. Like
right.
and that is a tough business in this world, like in
Mm,
this new world, because AI have gotten really good at transcribing.
transcribing. Yeah.
And one of the issues that he mentioned is now the stuff which is coming to him are things which are very noisy that AI cannot, like the current generation of AI cannot easily transcribe. So those are like much more difficult to transcribe, and it is like he has to spend a lot more hour to get the same output that he used to get earlier. Like so his when he is bidding for some work now, he has to put a lot more effort to get the same output. So I kind of see this whole transition process, right? But I also think that there is going to be some turbulence in this transition. But on
Mm,
the other hand, and on the other end of it, I think things would rebalance. Like so, there are
yeah.
like some skills which AI could do fairly easily, but there are still like AI is still not very good in kind of encoding experience. Like for example, AI is
Mm,
very smart, is not very street smart. Like
yeah.
AI is like what you can like when you think of a person like there is, as I was saying earlier, like a lot of their how they think of it is a function of their past experience and
Mm,
the constant input that they get like on everything. Like so AI is still very context driven. Like so you have to feed the
yeah.
context to the
And you
AI.
need and you need to check its work. I think
Exactly.
just on
Uh,
writing an email or write me 100 words on X, it will never be perfect, will it? And you have to use, like, it is that man machine interface again, isn't it?
yeah,
It's like, you've done this. This is good. Thank you, Mr. AI or whatever.
yeah,
And
exactly.
then yeah, and then if I look at this, I take the best bits out of it, but it saved me the time. So I guess looking at large organizations, this is my other question, is that if they invest correctly, this can really help a large organization's competitiveness, or a kind of an up and coming organization's competitiveness against a large organization. Like, a,
Which is
a small
very good point.
business can take on a large business now.
Yeah, which is a very good point. Like I think what
Mm,
this means is the future is going to be hyper competitive. Like
mm,
so what Kavia has done in the last like 6 months is just unbelievable. Like what I'm saying, like we are using a lot of AI ourselves. Like we
That's
are
good
kind
to
of
hear, because sometimes when I speak to people and they talk about AI and I say, and how you using, have you drunk the Kool-Aid? Are you basically, and you have been using it, right? So you're
yes,
doing
yes.
it yourself.
So whenever I talk to some of the engineers about new features, right?
Mm,
What I ask them is show me your session, like using either Kavia or other systems, like show
yeah,
me your chat sessions about this,
yeah,
where your content, you have loaded your
mm,
code and your context, and you have gotten the answer from it. Like what is it? And so a lot of our interactions are like, don't go and figure it out. Like you go figure it out by working collaboratively with AI.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think
That's
that
right.
is to me a very essential skill for people in this new
Mm.
world.
And
I
as you're
do.
as you're consulting with people to clients to help them, then you say, well, we went. It goes back to your whole. I understand the problem. I understand the solution. I can help you. I've
Yeah,
tried this myself. You know.
yeah, exactly. So I think there would be a point of turbulence where people have to reskill, But on the other hand, I do think that the competition is going to intensify. It's actually eventually customers and consumers would benefit because of this hyper competitive world where you cannot afford to be slow, like because your
Yeah.
competition are going to move faster and redeploy their resources in a combination of people and humans and AI. So you have to now respond in
Needs to
kind
move quick.
or left behind, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that organization in the future would leverage AI and people together to kind of get their competitive benefit. Like, so I do think what you could get from a single person would go multiple folds, like at least would become over time 10 times then what it is. I do hope the overall the compensation for people also would improve based on that. But on the other hand, I do think that it's not a question of you need less people now, but I do think that you would eventually employ still a good number of people like as you are employing now, but the output would come out a lot, and because your competition is now moving also as fast, so you have to keep up with them in some ways.
So it's a very exciting world. And I think, as we bring this conversation to a close, I'll just kind of finish up with what are you most excited about for Kavia and for yourself, I guess, in the next 12 months, as you start this journey.
So we are just starting like some early customer engagements, very early customer engagements now. I am like really looking forward to getting this to a point where like several companies can use it and eventually large enterprise, because there is a huge bar that we need to hit, we need to cross to be a vendor to people like me in my old role, right? Because the only
Yeah,
way
yeah.
I could sell to my old version of me is if it did so many things. So my goal is in the next 12 months get across that bar so that I could have several enterprise level customers using this and see the benefit of it and see like products being done much faster, features being done much faster using Kavia in the world.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a very successful journey, Labeeb, and we'll obviously hopefully be able to help you and watch you and work with you on it. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a wonderful conversation, hopefully very useful for those listening. And yeah, good luck in the next 12 months and beyond.
Thank you, David, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you. I like really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.